Yeah, thanks a lot, Christopher. And I have to admit, I haven't seen the basketball team arriving in Frankfurt. I was in Amsterdam at that time, so I really missed that one. Now, Jürgen heading, as Christopher said, strategy and sustainability, and obviously sustainability is a big topic for us as a bank, and particularly in regards to mortgages. We're sitting on quite a significant mortgage book, I would say, which comes with a couple of challenges in regards to decarbonization.
Yeah, absolutely. We will going to talk about this in a second. Tom, do you want to go?
Yes, thank you. Tom Rasser, Chief Banking Officer at NPAL, as said. What I do is helping the company getting financing solutions on the road for solar panels and heat pumps. So that's a very capital intensive hobby that we have, and you need a lot of financing for that, and smart solutions that the colleagues already devised in the past and that we need to build on in the future. And we're of course supported by esteemed financial institutions, the likes of ING.
Great. I think to complete the round, I'm Chris. I'm a partner in EY, working with the guys here on the left-hand side, also on the transformative aspect of how to improve the rollout of solar and other transformative technology. Maybe we just start with why does it make sense to bring you guys together on the stage, right? So I think the connectivity here is that retail banks, I mean, due to owning a large part of the mortgage portfolios in Germany, and of course the real estate industry and real estate actually creating a significant part of the carbon footprint, they have a very interesting role and also a big task to transform their own portfolios today out of non-green portfolios into green portfolios going forward. We all know that people that own houses have a large task in transforming their houses, sanitizing them. So energetic sanitization is a big issue. And making their clients, their current portfolios to transform is one of the biggest tasks that banks need to address. Also knowing that the transformation period for those portfolios is significantly long. And we all know that the current mortgage environment in the marketplace is not very good, which means we don't see a lot of new buildings coming out, which have already transformed or are built to standards that are up to date, but rather the very large number of older buildings that need transformation have to be transformed, and financing that is a core part of the task that banks will address going forward. There's a couple of ESG related loan offerings also out there, but I think combination of what we see here, financial services as the capital providers, Tom, you already mentioned that, right? And then new players transforming the industry and the rollout of these technologies are probably a good setup for combination and ensuring that the transformation is quicker than we can expect it to be. Okay, so why don't we go for the first questions and probably also understanding a little bit better the motivation behind that. Just a second. So maybe to start with Jürgen. We have a status quo right now in the industry. I mean, you all know we have the Gebäudeenergiegesetz, which was just passed last Friday. We have had long discussions in the industry around, is that the right way to do it? We have a lot of consumers that are kind of being very unsecure about would they be doing it at this point in time? What is the promotional aspects of that? Can they actually get funds from the state? This has now been set into the way that obviously we have the environment right now. But maybe first of all, for you, Jürgen, the question. I mean, the status quo that was just mentioned, do you agree with that? Do you have a view on what is the impact specifically here also of that new law? And are banks then in a pole position to drive that green transformation?
Well, maybe let me start a bit with describing the current issue from a banking perspective, and then I turn to the client perspective. From a banking perspective, banks have admitted or committed basically to a net zero banking alliance, which basically says in easy words, we have committed to steer our loan portfolio along the 1.5 degree path, looking at the current numbers or CO2 emission of the portfolios, then I think it's not a secret that it's well above the actual target. With other words, we're eating up each and every year our CO2 budgets. And this also means, from a banking perspective, we need to drive actually the modernization or retrofitting of the real estates we finance. At the same time, clients are more and more aware of rising energy costs, but on one hand, on the other hand, also feeling a little bit more, responsibility for the environment and the negative impact they create, and also increasingly political pressure to do the retrofitting. But I think that's basically, you would normally say, look, that's perfect situation, then let's go for it. But on the other hand, we also see that only 12 out of 100 considering a retrofitting are actually really completing a retrofitting of their house and home. Obviously, there's something is breaking in between, which is more or less related to lack of information, maybe too much information, so confusion, not knowing what kind of technology should be implemented. And then second, there's a couple of other issues around, like availability of craftsmanship and so on. So what's the role of banks? Usually, you would say it's steering of the financing into the right routes, which is definitely true. But I think in that case, it's not sufficient to do so. There's a couple of other challenges to be solved. And to your point, are banks in the pole position? Yes, in regards to steering of financing. Yes, in regards to solving client issues. That's something banks really, really need to learn. And there's a lot of things to learn and improve and provide to clients.
Thanks, Jürgen. And maybe passing on to Tom, because you have been solving some of those issues already in the past by creating, I would say, a supply chain, integrated supply chain for photovoltaic, as well as other technologies. What's your view on your contribution as a non-bank in that environment, of course? How can you collaborate with a bank going forward to make that better?
Yes, thank you. What we have done so far is made it really easy for end consumers to invest in a solar system or a heat pump. Basically, the offering is look at your energy bill today and look at what it would cost you to install a solar system on your roof. And you will be cheaper. It will be a 20-year contract, and a monthly payment will be lower than what you currently pay to your energy provider, which is a really good argument for any individual to invest in something like that. And then we take away a lot of the hassle. So in Germany, it's quite interesting to get the connection to the grid. That's quite an exercise, and that's not so easy to do. So all these processes from cradle to grave have been effectively solved by NPAL to make it really easy for the end customer. Now coming to the banks. Banks are uniquely positioned, believe it or not. They still have a lot of trust from their customers. And it's a difference when you go to a relatively young company like NPAL and give them the trust to solve that for you. Still, a lot of customers have done that and are very happy customers, so that's a good thing. But banks have even more customers. They're way bigger than NPAL, and they have a larger number of customers, and they have this inbuilt trust. And therefore, I believe that the cooperation between companies like NPAL and banks can be very productive to bring that end customer view and that the ease of going through such a process together with that trust that a bank still enjoys. And of course, the very strong capital position that such a bank brings to the table.
This sounds very positive. Although we must say that it's not only companies like yourself and banks that kind of drive the transformation. There's also additional parts in the ecosystem of energetic sanitization, which basically need to be addressed and which also are creating pain points today. You want to shortly discuss about the other kind of parts of the ecosystem, Jürgen?
Yeah, happy to do so. Sure. I mean, I think if you look at the journey customers need to go through, then it basically starts with the, let's say, awareness that they need to do or could do something. Then it goes along with the energy advisor, and then the availability of public subsidies. At the end, also providers like NPAL or others of this world. And I think the way how to solve it is to bring together basically the whole ecosystem into one seamless journey. That's what basically we would all dream of. But you can also imagine that building this is maybe not the easiest thing. And there's also a couple of let's say, glue that's missing in the middle and that needs to be provided or built.
So you were talking about probably the energy consultants that we see out there in the market. Currently, one of the biggest bottlenecks, try and get hold of one that is good, that actually creates something that is also a viable and sustainable transformation case for your private home. It's very difficult. We're also talking about insulation companies. So basically, it's not only the transformation of the heating side, it's also windows, it's also insulation of houses. This is probably a very big kind of ecosystem. How can this be created? And maybe Tom, for you to give us a perspective on that, what part of that would you be covering, and how would you try to bring together the other parts of the ecosystem?
Yeah, thank you. So what we've built so far is really an integrated solution for relatively new houses. So if you don't need so much of insulation in addition, then probably NPAL can cover you in full with a heat pump and a solar installation. The challenge would be to also expand that to older houses that need a lot of work to get energy efficient. And there, I do believe that you need indeed the glue. I could imagine a larger company could be that glue. And in my view, some of the banks are ideally positioned to fulfill that role. And that would be a perfect embedded finance solution that everybody always talks about, but unfortunately not always makes it into practice. So I think that role is clearly there, and not someone needs to pick that role up.
So no pressure on the banks, Jürgen.
Thanks.
No, but I think we also have a couple of other obstacles or limitations or burdens or pain points in the market. I'm thinking about probably the ability to have a good consultation for the promotional activities of the promotional banks. I'm thinking about regulatory burdens, specifically in transforming. Any view on that end? And how would you see the role that Tom just gave you as being one of those players that have to drive the transformation?
Yeah, let me maybe start with the roadblocks, and I think there's a couple of them. You mentioned availability of energy advisory services. I think first, yes, we need more of them, and I could also imagine a bit more support by the government or political environment. You could also ease basically the certification of these guys in order to make more capacities available in the market. Second, I think not for each and every subsidy the need to go through the full energy advisory services, maybe also not the most useful or necessary thing if it comes to limited resources. Other areas, I think the reliability of subsidy programs, transparency, but also reliability of the programs. We've seen some, let's say, fluctuation in the provision of programs, and also short notice cancellation of programs. I think that's also not helpful. And I think other than that, it's also the simply transparency on these services. I think that's something that needs to be improved. Yes, banks can play and need to play a significant role in this. And I think also in the past, maybe we've not been vocal enough if it comes to lobbying. Just look at the law that just has passed the Bundestag. So maybe banks or financial institutions overall could have been more vocal in advocating also for this law and the strictness of this law, which we haven't done. So that's also maybe a learning going forward for which banks can be more vocal, more active. But as said at the beginning, it's also a learning journey. Banks have not been good at building ecosystems and full client journeys in the past. I think that's something we really need to pick and improve going forward.
I think it's the seamlessness of the process itself. So today, if you want to renovate your home, it's basically, it's almost like an obstacle race. You basically have to overcome many burdens, many different aspects. You have to bring together different people different providers, and basically make up your mind. So installing something like an end-to-end user journey is probably helpful in clearing all of that. I mean, Tom, you have done this basically for a part of the ecosystem. And what would be a role that you would see within your own company, but also then going forward for the market to make that more accessible and end-to-end? So ideally seamless for the user, kind of coming with his data to you or to any of the other ecosystem operators, and then basically getting something back like a business case and a transformation offering?
So I think what we can offer is what we've learned over the past 6 years in our existence, how you can provide services that seamlessly sync with life. That's really what the end customer wants to have. And we see that a lot of that is already there and we can provide it. We also innovate there. So for instance, we now offer the double Einspeisevergütung for end customers where they can sell their energy to us for double the amount. And that makes it again very attractive to invest in a PV installation. So that sort of thing is really our role in life. Where I do think we need to be a bit smart being NPAL is that we don't overreach. So we don't have an intention of controlling the whole value chain. We don't have an intention of now all of a sudden going into insulation or something like that. So as long as we do well what we do and we keep inventing our new things or reinventing ourselves, then I believe we have a good opportunity. And one of the things where we do expect quite a bit is a more intensive cooperation with the independent installing companies. There are a huge number around. We've built up our own installation company with a lot of people, 2,500, but we still also cooperate with independent installers and we want to support them building their businesses going forward a bit more than we have so far even.
That clarifies the delivery part of the technical installation. It does not clarify anything around the viability, about the setup, the orchestration of the ecosystem. Jürgen, I mean, with banks being like probably one of the parties that are deeply impacted because you want to work on your green transformation and the green asset ratio, right?
Exactly.
Isn't there I would almost like to say as a societal task or requirement or challenge to the banks to actually start orchestrating this wider ecosystem?
Yeah, I think it's a scientific one, but I also think it's a one from a simply pure customer experience perspective, building this seamless journey. And I think commenting just on you, Tom, I think from a provider perspective, demand is sufficient to grow all these companies, be it yours or others. But I think that there's a big discrepancy in this market between the companies providing services and being sufficiently overwhelmed by demand, and also and the perspective a bank needs to take. This loan book and the required modernization in this market is by far bigger than the supply actually can be handled. And from that perspective, there needs to be one tackling this topic from a really full, seamless journey. That's what you also said. And here, and that's also what I keep on telling within my own bank, that can only be provided at the moment by banks, because they are the only ones feeling the pressure that this needs to be solved end to end, because otherwise you will not get the clients to do their retrofittings. They will stuck somewhere. As said at the beginning, we did this research. Only 12 out of this 100 really are completing their journey. And I think this tells us that this 12 is sufficient for all the companies to grow a lot, but it's not enough to solve the decarbonization topic. And yes, that's basically the challenge we are facing and we need to solve. Will solve. I mean, that's for sure.
So you already mentioned, and I would agree, that banks may not be the most efficient ecosystem builders. What needs to change to make this happen?
I think what needs to change is actually understanding what banking in the future means. And banking in the future, from my perspective, does not only mean providing money or funding to people, fulfilling dreams and stuff like this. It really means to take the client really support clients the whole journey along. And this is really a learning process. This is usually banks are used that clients are coming to them and asking for, once clients have made the decision for an investment and they ask for funding. But now it's the other way around. We need to make clients aware that they need to invest and should invest, and then we need to help them. And really, this is something we need to learn to handle data differently, be more active, proactive, and also combine certain and you said orchestration. I think that's exactly the right phrasing. Orchestrate certain players, because there's not this one-stop shop available, which we would all need or want to look for. That's something we need to build this by ourselves for the very first time.
It's interesting. I mean, we've had opportunities in the past to build ecosystems. We all know what came from it. I mean, Apple and Google and Facebook and probably even Amazon have created that and have made use of the banking system, and have taken the lead on the customer, right? So the question in this case is, who has enough interest besides the banks to take lead on the customers? Will we buy Amazon end-to-end journeys in 5 years from now because they are the ones that can orchestrate? Or will banks be able to do that? Or will there be other players in the market? To be honest, I don't see anyone right now that has a vested interest, except the public government, which may be orchestrating some of that. But then on the other side, it's only the banks currently with the required client contacts, and I think that's one of the key parts, because you own mortgage portfolios. ING probably about 10-15% market share in the mortgage market, so quite a significant amount of clients that can be hopefully motivated to do stuff like that. So I mean, looking out to the future, and like let's say 2 to 3 years ahead, right from now. What would be the ideal setup for a company like NPAL to operate in? And Tom, that's your question again.
So the optimal environment for NPAL to operate in, basically it's going on with what we're doing now in an environment that's supportive by politics, very predictable and reliable subsidy schemes that don't come out of the blue and are not abolished out of the blue. So for the end customer, it needs to be predictable, reliable. I should not be making an investment today and find out that next week it would have been a better deal. That's really horrible if you find yourself in that situation. So that's a very important one where the government can help us big time. The second one is that we will draw more on the expertise and capacity of independent installers. And that may be one way of solving the insulation and retrofitting issue. And we will need to persuade people with money, institutional investors, banks, to adjust their policies in order to cover the full lifetime of an installation. Because currently the way heat pumps and solar systems are being financed by most of the banks, not all of the banks, but most of the banks, it's basically you can get a maximum tenor of 10 to 12 years. For an installation that in case of a heat pump has a lifetime of at least 15 years, and with solar systems 25 years, it simply does not make sense to limit the lifetime. And in that ideal world as well, the efforts from the ECB, albeit it's a bit of a nasty remark, I admit it, and the pressure they put on the banks to green their business would be very helpful as well.
I think you basically went through all the obstacles on the journeys we had in the past year. So I also try to get a solar system panel on my home. It's almost impossible. First of all, nobody replies, right? So whenever I send out a request to a company, because I don't have one of those super large home with super large roofs, basically nobody answers. Then the second thing is it's very difficult to find an energy consultant giving you feedback. It's very difficult to install a heat pump in the setting that I'm living in. So there's all the obstacles I could have envisaged. They are here, right? And also the changing regulatory environment that you mentioned. How much sense do you actually get back? That sometimes depending on the month that you switch on the photovoltaic installation. So very difficult for a user, definitely, or for a normal client, definitely not manageable. So let's hope that we get more security with the Gebäudeenergiegesetz that just went into action. But looking forward, again, Jürgen, from your point of view, wouldn't it be a good idea also to team up with some of those companies, either invest into them or cooperate or do joint ventures to just further this idea of building a green ecosystem? And if yes, would that have to be exclusive for one bank, or could you even think about opening up for other banks?
Well, last part of your question is a difficult one. Let me start with the first one. I think definitely investing and is one of the big pieces here, because supply is simply not sufficient in order to solve demand. That also means banks need to be willing to help companies to grow and also guarantee a minimum amount of let's say units to be bought by clients in order to give the certainty and secure, on the other hand, investments. I think that's definitely needed, and it can't be solved by one partner. It needs to be also the capabilities needs to be built to orchestrate actually really certain partners, be it along the certain steps of the value chain, but also within the one step of the value chain. None of the companies existing in the market will be able to solve one portfolio's issue by itself. Simply not enough capacity. It requires investment, requires braveness by banks to do so. Definitely. Yeah, is there willingness to cooperate among the banks? You could argue on one hand, it could be a utility like we have this in payments, so basically run together by banks. Yes, for sure. Another argument could be that each and everyone is now hunting to solve their decarbonization issue, and this could also be a competitive one. And at the end, there's also some money to be made by banks in order to, from a finance perspective, and maybe even some fees to be taken from clients for orchestrating the whole journey. I think that's something that needs to be figured out. I could imagine basically both scenarios, but I don't know where it's going to land. Looking at the payment industry, I think banks have not been very successful in creating joint utilities or stuff like this.
There's other examples like KYC, AML, where there's no competitive differentiation anyway. But still, I think the German banking landscape at least has a historical tendency to not be able to cooperate and rather go competitive. On the other hand, being competitive means, Tom, I mean, you're in a great position, right? You are the biggest installer. Probably people will be knocking at your door every day and saying, "Oh, let's team up." Is that something that you're envisaging?
Yes, we're open to that, of course. So we do like to cooperate. We cooperate with banks. We cooperate with installer companies. We cooperate with producers, manufacturers of what we make. We went quite early on during COVID to China to get closer ties. We're now expanding throughout Asia to create new ties. So yes, people are knocking on our doors, and we knock on people's doors because we do not believe we can do this all alone.
Okay, so there's opportunities, obviously, for building ecosystems. Looking very much forward to what comes from this. We're at the end of today's panel, so thanks, Jürgen, thanks, Tom, for these insights. Probably they will be around for discussions if you want them to be. I think it's a historical societal challenge. I can only hope that guys like you can find ways to collaborate and drive the transformation much faster than we are seeing it right now. So from my end, thanks very much for today's discussion. Maybe one final thing, if you want to listen how some of the market players are looking into this, specifically also including the biggest promotional bank, KfW in Germany. Wait out for our channel. We have a podcast channel. It's called EY FinTech and Beyond. We will have in very due course a podcast with Jürgen, another major contributor from the banking industry, as well as KfW, who are kind of handing out the promotions on our channel. So take a look at that. And if you don't have a party for tonight, I can also offer you the opening of EY Startup Academy, which is our local accelerator we're running here. So if you want to come on and visit us at Tech Quartier, starts at 5. That's why we also need to get into the taxi very soon to not miss that opening. Thanks, everybody. Speak soon. And thanks again to the panelists.